Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku became Gotham's Dark Knight instead of Batman. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air crackled with unnatural energy as Izuku Midoriya, better known to the world as the pro-hero Deku, analyzed the villain before him. At 22, he had faced countless threats, but something about this one set every instinct screaming. The villain, who called himself Fracture, stood in the center of a devastated city block in downtown Mizurufu, his body seeming to phase in and out of reality itself. Everyone stay back. Deku called out to the crowd of civilians and fellow heroes who had gathered at the perimeter. His green hair whipped in the wind generated by the unstable quirk energy, and his latest hero costume, a sleek combination of dark green and black with reinforced gauntlets, hummed with the barely contained power of One for All. Beside him, a small figure shifted nervously. Eri, now 13 years old, had insisted on coming along for what was supposed to be a routine patrol. Her horn glowed faintly as she watched the scene unfold, her control over her rewind quirk having improved dramatically under Deku's mentorship over the years. "Mr. Deku," she said quietly, her red eyes wide with concern, "something's wrong with the space around him. It's not just his quirk, it's like reality itself is breaking." Deku's analytical mind raced as he observed the phenomenon. Eri was right. The air around Fracture wasn't just distorting, it was tearing. Fragments of what looked like other places, a desert, an ocean, a metallic corridor, flickered in and out of existence around the villain like broken mirror shards. "My quirk," Fracture laughed, his voice echoing strangely as if coming from multiple directions at once, "allows me to break the barriers between dimensions. I've spent years developing it, pushing it beyond its limits. And now, I'll tear open a hole so large that this entire city will be swallowed into the void between worlds." "That's not going to happen," Deku said firmly, green lightning beginning to dance around his body as he activated One for All at 15%. "Whatever you're planning ends here." Fracture's grin widened unnaturally. "You think you can stop what's already begun? Look around you, hero." Deku's eyes widened as he realized the distortions were spreading. Cracks in reality spider-webbed out from Fracture's position, each one showing glimpses of different worlds. In one, he caught sight of a world covered in ice, in another, endless flames. But it was the largest crack, directly behind Fracture, that drew his attention. Through it, he could see a dark city skyline unlike anything in Japan, Gothic architecture stretching into a night sky dominated by searchlights. "Eri, get back to the evacuation zone," Deku ordered, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he developed over his years as a pro-hero. "Find Uravity and tell her to expand the evacuation to a 10-block radius." "But Mr. Deku." "Now, Eri." The girl nodded and ran, knowing better than to argue when he used that tone. Deku waited until she was clear before powering up further, One for All crackling at 30%. "You're making a mistake," Deku called out to Fracture, trying one last time to reach him through words, a habit he'd never quite shaken from his early days. "These dimensional tiers, you can't control them. You're going to destroy yourself along with everything else." "Destruction," Fracture said, his body beginning to phase more rapidly, "is just another form of creation." "Let me show you." The villain raised both hands, and the largest tier began to widen. The pull was immediate and devastating. Cars, debris, and chunks of pavement were drawn toward the growing portal. Deku dug his feet into the ground, using float to anchor himself while black whips shot out from his arms, grabbing onto nearby buildings to keep himself steady. Through the chaos, he heard a scream. His head snapped to the side to see a young boy, no more than 6, being pulled toward the portal. Without hesitation, Deku launched himself forward, using a combination of float and air force to navigate the gravitational chaos. He caught the boy with Black Whip, pulling him close and shielding him with his body. "It's okay," he said gently, even as the pull grew stronger. "You're going to be alright. A hero always saves everyone." He used FA Gene to build up energy, then released it in a burst that sent the boy flying safely toward the evacuation zone where other heroes caught him. But the effort had brought Deku dangerously close to the portal. "Yes!" Fracture screamed with manic glee. "Even the great Deku cannot resist the pull of the void. Become the first sacrifice to my new world." Deku gritted his teeth, pushing one for all to 45%. His muscles screamed in protest, but he managed to halt his movement toward the portal. He needed to stop this now, before the tear grew too large to contain. Detroit. The word had barely left his mouth when he heard it, another scream, high and terrified. His blood ran cold as he recognized the voice. Eri. She hadn't made it to the evacuation zone. The expanding dimensional tear had caught her off guard, and she was being pulled directly toward a smaller portal that had opened to her left. This one showed a different scene, a dark alley in what looked like the same Gothic city, rain falling steadily from an overcast sky. Time seemed to slow as Deku's mind calculated distances and trajectories. He could reach Fracture and potentially stop all the portals from expanding further, or he could save Eri from being pulled into an unknown dimension. There wasn't time for both. It wasn't even a choice. Deku pivoted, redirecting all his built-up energy toward Eri. He pushed one for all to 60%, consequences be damned, and shot toward her like a green comet. He caught her just as her feet left the ground, wrapping her in his arms protectively. Mr. Deku! She cried, clinging to him. I've got you, he said, trying to use air force to push them away from the portal. But the pull was too strong, and his anchor points with Black Whip were failing as the buildings themselves began to crumble. No, no, no! He tried to adjust their trajectory, to aim for solid ground, but Fracture's maniacal laughter filled the air. You chose to save one instead of stopping me. How heroically foolish! Now watch as your weakness dooms you both. The villain raised his hands higher, and all the portals suddenly pulsed with increased power. The pull became irresistible. Deku saw the main portal rushing toward them, or were they rushing toward it? In that moment of chaotic gravity, it was impossible to tell. Eri, Deku said urgently, whatever happens, stay close to me. Don't let go. I won't, she promised, her horn beginning to glow brighter. Maybe I can rewind us back to... No! Deku said sharply. Your quirk and these dimensional tears. We don't know what might happen. It could make things worse. They were at the portal's edge now. Through it, Deku could see that Gothic city more clearly, rain-slicked streets, Art Deco architecture, and in the distance, a massive bridge lit up against the night sky. It looked like no city in Japan, like no city he'd ever seen. With the last of his strength and a desperate idea, Deku managed to grab Eri and throw her with every bit of FA gene-enhanced power he had left, sending her flying back toward the crowd of heroes. Catch her, he roared. He saw Ingenium, Tenya Ida, race forward in a blur of blue, catching Eri safely. Relief flooded through him for a single moment before the portal claimed him. The sensation of crossing dimensions was unlike anything Deku had ever experienced. It felt like being turned inside out while simultaneously compressed and expanded. Colors that didn't exist flashed before his eyes, and he heard sounds that had no source. His quirk flickered and surged within him, one for all seeming to react violently to the dimensional shift. Then, suddenly it was over. Deku crashed into wet pavement, rolling several times before coming to a stop against a brick wall. Rain immediately soaked through his costume, cold and heavy. He groaned, pushing himself up on shaking arms, and took stock of his situation. He was in an alley, narrow, dark, and dirty in a way that suggested long-term neglect rather than temporary mess. The buildings on either side rose up like cliff faces, fire escapes creating a metal lattice against the brick. Garbage bins overflowed with refuse, and the distant sound of sirens provided an urban soundtrack he knew all too well. But something was wrong. As Deku stood, stretching out his senses, he realized what it was. In any city in Japan, in any city in his world, there was always the subtle presence of quirk usage, the electromagnetic signature of someone with an electricity quirk, the temperature variations from fire or ice users, the subtle spatial distortions from transformation quirks. It was a background noise he'd grown so accustomed to that he'd stopped noticing it. Here, there was nothing. The city was quiet in a way that made his skin crawl. Not silent. He could hear cars, voices, music from a nearby club, but quiet in that fundamental way that suggested an absence rather than a presence. Where am I? He muttered, checking his costume for damage. His phone was cracked but functional, showing no signal. The GPS app spun uselessly, unable to find his location. A sound from deeper in the alley made him tense. Footsteps, multiple sets, moving with purpose. Deku's danger sense, usually so reliable, gave him nothing, not because there was no danger, but because it seemed muted somehow, as if struggling to function properly in this strange new world. He activated One for All at 5%, just enough to enhance his physical capabilities without the telltale green lightning. The footsteps grew closer, and he heard voices. Told you this was the perfect spot. Rich folks always cut through here after the theater. Yeah, just keep watch. We grab the jewelry, maybe the wallets, and we're gone. Quick and clean, criminals planning a mugging. Deku's heroic instincts kicked in immediately. He moved silently along the wall, using skills learned from years of hero work to approach undetected. As he rounded a corner, he saw them, 3 men in cheap suits, one holding a gun, waiting near the alley's entrance to a main street. His eyes widened as he looked past them. The street beyond was like something out of an old movie. Cars that looked decades out of date rolled past, their designs all curves and chrome. The fashion of the pedestrians was similarly vintage, men in suits and fedoras, women in elegant dresses and pearls. It was like stepping back in time, except the technology he glimpsed, electronic billboards, modern streetlights, suggested otherwise. A couple turned into the alley, laughing at some private joke. They were well dressed, the man in an expensive tuxedo, the woman in a pearl necklace that caught the dim light. Behind them, a young boy, maybe 8 years old, dressed in his own formal wear, looking bored in the way only children dragged to adult events could. The criminals moved immediately. Wallets and jewelry, now! The one with the gun stepped out, weapon raised. The woman screamed. The man stepped protectively in front of his family, hands raised. Please, we'll give you whatever you want. Just don't hurt us. Deku moved without thinking. One for All surged through him at 20% as he burst from the shadows. His fist connected with the gunman's wrist, sending the weapon flying. Before the criminal could even cry out, Deku had him restrained with black whip, dark energy tendrils pinning him to the alley wall. The other 2 criminals stumbled back in shock. What the hell? Deku didn't give them time to recover. A controlled air force blast knocked one into a garbage bin, and a quick application of float and FA gene let him close the distance to the third, taking him down with a precise strike to a pressure point. The entire confrontation had taken less than 5 seconds. Are you all right? Deku asked, turning to the family. His heroic smile, practiced over years of saving people, seemed to have the opposite effect here. They looked terrified of him. What are you? The man stammered, pulling his wife and son behind him. The question caught Deku off guard. I'm a hero. I'm here too. The sound of a gunshot cut through the air. Time seemed to stop. The man's eyes widened in shock as a red stain spread across his white shirt. He looked down at it in confusion, then up at Deku, before collapsing to his knees. Thomas! The woman screamed, catching him as he fell. Deku spun around to see a 4th criminal, one he'd missed, standing at the other end of the alley with a smoking gun. The man's hands were shaking, his eyes wild with panic. Nobody was supposed to be here. Joe said it would be empty. He raised the gun again, this time aiming at the woman. No! Deku roared, pushing One for All to 40%. He moved faster than the human eye could follow, crossing the distance in an instant. His hand closed around the gun just as it fired, the bullet crumpling against his reinforced glove. The criminal fell backward, scrambling away from Deku, whose green lightning was now fully visible, crackling around him like an aura of power. Martha! Martha, run! The injured man, Thomas, wheezed from where he lay. The woman, Martha, was sobbing, pressing her hands against the wound. Someone help! Please, someone call an ambulance! Deku dropped the criminal with a quick chop to the neck and rushed back to them. His hands glowed with the faint energy of One for All as he pressed them against the wound, trying desperately to stop the bleeding. All his first aid training, all his experience with injured civilians, and he knew it wasn't enough. The bullet had hit something vital. Hey, stay with me, he said to Thomas, his voice steady despite the panic rising in his chest. Look at me. What's your name, Thomas? Thomas Wayne, the man gasped, his eyes starting to lose focus. Okay, Thomas. You're going to be okay. Help is coming. It was a lie. Deku could hear sirens, but they were distant, going in the wrong direction. Talk to me. Tell me about your son. Thomas's eyes found the boy, who was standing frozen in shock. Bruce, my son. Bruce, Dad? The boy's voice was small, broken, and then Thomas Wayne's eyes went still. Thomas? Thomas! Martha Wayne shook her husband, her pearls catching the light as they swayed. No, 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 please! She looked up at Deku, tears streaming down her face. Save him! You have powers, I saw it! Save him! Deku's hands trembled as he continued trying to stop the bleeding, even though he knew it was too late. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I can't, my powers don't work that way. I'm sorry. Martha Wayne let out a wail of grief that would haunt Deku for the rest of his life. She collapsed over her husband's body, sobbing uncontrollably. The boy, Bruce, stood perfectly still, his young face pale with shock. His eyes, wide and blue, stared at his parents with an expression of incomprehension, as if his mind simply couldn't process what he was seeing. Deku stood slowly, his legs shaking. He'd failed. He'd arrived in time, had stopped the first attack, but had missed one criminal. One mistake, and now a man was dead. A father was dead. He looked at his hands, covered in Thomas Wayne's blood, and felt something crack inside his chest. The sound of footsteps made him look up. The fourth criminal, the one who'd shot Thomas, was trying to crawl away. Something hot and angry flared in Deku's chest. He took a step toward the man, one for all crackling more violently around him. You! The word came out as a growl. The criminal whimpered, trying to crawl faster. A small hand tugged at Deku's costume. He looked down to see Bruce Wayne standing beside him. The boy wasn't looking at the criminal, or even at his parents. He was looking up at Deku with those shocking blue eyes, tears streaming down his young face. Please, Bruce whispered. Don't leave me alone. The words hit Deku like a physical blow. The anger drained out of him, replaced by a deep, aching sadness. He knelt down, bringing himself to Bruce's eye level, and gently placed a hand on the boy's shoulder. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. I promise. Sirens were getting closer now. Real ones, not the distant ones from before. Deku could hear multiple vehicles approaching fast. He looked back at Martha Wayne, still crying over her husband's body, then at Bruce, who was trembling like a leaf in a storm. What's your full name? Deku asked gently. Bruce. Bruce Wayne, the boy managed. Okay, Bruce. My name is Izuku Midoriya, but people call me Deku. He paused, unsure how to explain what he was in a world that clearly didn't have heroes like his own. I'm someone who helps people, and I'm going to help you, okay? Bruce nodded minutely, his small hand gripping Deku's costume tightly. Police cars screeched to a halt at the alley entrance. Officers poured out, guns drawn, shouting commands. Deku raised his hands slowly, making sure they could see he wasn't a threat, though he kept one for all ready at a low percentage just in case. Freeze! Hands where we can see them. The criminals are unconscious, Deku called out, gesturing to the three he tied up and the fourth who had passed out from fear. This family needs medical attention immediately. One of the officers, an older man with graying hair and a thick mustache, pushed through the others. His eyes took in the scene, the tied-up criminals, the dead man, the crying woman, the boy, and Deku in his strange costume with green energy still faintly visible around him. Dear God, the officer breathed. Thomas and Martha Wayne. The names seemed to mean something significant. The officer's entire demeanor changed, urgency replacing caution. Paramedics rushed in, gently pulling Martha away from Thomas's body. She fought them at first, not wanting to leave her husband, but eventually collapsed into their care. The boy, Deku said to the officer who seemed to be in charge. Someone needs to look after the boy. The officer nodded, his expression grim. We'll contact Alfred Pennyworth, the family butler. He'll take care of young Bruce. He looked at Deku more carefully. And who exactly are you? What are you? Before Deku could answer, Bruce spoke up, his voice small but clear. He saved us. The bad men were going to hurt us all, and he stopped them. He tried to save Dad too. The officer's expression softened slightly. He knelt beside Bruce. Is that true, son? Bruce nodded, fresh tears spilling down his cheeks. He moved so fast. Like he had powers. Like something from my comic books. The officer stood, giving Deku a long, evaluating look. Powers, huh? He seemed to make a decision. You'll need to come with us. There are going to be questions. A lot of questions, Deku nodded. He had questions of his own. Where was he? How had he gotten here? And most importantly, how could he get back? But looking at Bruce Wayne, orphaned because Deku had failed to stop one criminal, he knew his own problems would have to wait. Can I stay with him? Bruce asked suddenly, looking between the officer and Deku. Please? I don't want to be alone. The officer hesitated, but Deku spoke up. If it's allowed, I'd like to stay with him until his guardian arrives. That's not exactly protocol. Please, Bruce said again, and something in his voice, the barely controlled terror of a child who had just lost everything, swayed the officer. All right. But you're both coming to the station. We'll wait for Mr. Pennyworth there. As they were led to the police cars, Deku kept his hand on Bruce's shoulder, a silent promise of protection. The boy walked like a zombie, his eyes vacant, shock setting in fully now that the immediate danger had passed. The ride to the police station was surreal. Deku stared out the window at Gotham City. He'd heard one of the officers use that name, trying to process everything. The architecture was unlike anything in Japan, all Gothic spires and Art Deco buildings. The technology was an odd mix of advanced and antiquated. And everywhere, that strange absence of quirks made the world feel hollow, incomplete. At the station, they were led to a small room with a table and chairs. Bruce sat close to Deku, not speaking, just staring at his hands. Someone brought them water and a blanket for Bruce, who was shivering despite the warm night. Bruce, Deku said gently, do you want to talk about anything? Sometimes it helps. Bruce looked up at him with those piercing blue eyes. Are you real? The powers, I mean. I wasn't imagining it. Deku considered lying, but something about this boy, about the trauma he just experienced, demanded honesty. Yes, it's real. Where I come from, many people have powers. We call them quirks. Where you come from? Bruce's intelligence, even through his grief, was apparent. It's complicated. I'm not from around here. Bruce was quiet for a moment. Then, in a voice so small Deku almost missed it, he asked, why couldn't you save him? The question was like a knife to the heart. Deku had asked himself the same thing about so many people over the years. He thought of Sir Nightai, of all the people he'd failed to save despite his power. I wasn't fast enough, Deku admitted, his voice thick with emotion. I didn't see the fourth criminal in time. I'm sorry, Bruce. I'm so sorry. Bruce's composure finally cracked completely. He began sobbing, great gasping sobs that shook his small frame. Without thinking, Deku pulled the boy into a hug, letting him cry against his chest. He felt his own tears falling, mourning for this child who had lost everything, for the parents taken too soon, for his own failure. It's not your fault, Bruce said between sobs, surprising Deku. You tried. You saved Mom and me. It's not your fault. But Deku couldn't shake the feeling that it was. If he'd been more thorough, if he'd sensed the fourth criminal, if he'd been just a second faster. The door opened, and an elderly man in an immaculate suit entered. His face was composed, but Deku could see the grief in his eyes, the way his hands trembled slightly. Master Bruce, the man said, his British accent pronounced. Alfred. Bruce pulled away from Deku and ran to the man, who caught him in a firm embrace. I'm here, young sir. I'm here. Alfred Pennyworth looked over Bruce's head at Deku, taking in his strange costume and the green energy that still occasionally sparked around him. You're the one who tried to save them, Alfred said. It wasn't a question. I'm sorry I couldn't do more, Deku said, standing and bowing deeply in the Japanese style. Alfred studied him for a long moment. The police told me what you did. How you fought off multiple armed criminals with unusual abilities. He paused. They also told me that Master Bruce has refused to be separated from you. Deku looked at Bruce, who had turned in Alfred's arms to watch him. He's been through something terrible. If my presence helps. Where are you from, young man? Alfred interrupted. And please don't insult my intelligence by claiming to be from anywhere on this earth. I've seen many things in my years, but nothing quite like you. Deku made a decision. These people had just lost everything. They deserved honesty. I'm from a different world. A different dimension, I think. I was fighting a villain, a criminal with powers, who could tear holes between dimensions. I got pulled through. Alfred's expression didn't change, but Bruce's eyes widened. Another dimension? Like in the science fiction stories? Something like that, Deku confirmed. Alfred was quiet for a moment, processing this information with remarkable composure. And can you return? I don't know. I don't even know exactly where I am, except that this city is called Gotham. Gotham City, New Jersey, United States of America, Alfred supplied. And clearly, a world very different from your own. No one here has quirks, powers, Deku said. Where I'm from, 80% of the population has some kind of special ability. Bruce pulled away from Alfred slightly, looking at Deku with something like wonder breaking through his grief. What can you do? Deku hesitated, then held out his hand. Green lightning crackled around it, and he let a small amount of black whip emerge, the dark energy tendril waving gently in the air. Bruce's eyes went wide. Incredible, Alfred murmured. A knock at the door interrupted them. The older officer from before entered. Mr. Pennyworth, you're free to take Master Bruce home. As for you, he looked at Deku, we're not quite sure what to do with you. You're clearly not a normal criminal, but you're also not normal. He's coming with us, Bruce said suddenly, his voice firm despite his tear-stained face. Everyone turned to look at the boy. Master Bruce, Alfred began gently, I don't think he saved us. He tried to save Dad. And he doesn't have anywhere to go. Bruce's young face set in an expression of determination that seemed beyond his years. We have room at the manor. Alfred and the officer exchanged looks. The officer shrugged. Technically, he hasn't committed any crimes. In fact, he stopped a crime. We have no reason to hold him. Alfred sighed, recognizing the stubborn set of Bruce's jaw. It was pure Thomas Wayne. Very well. Mr. Midoriya. Izuka Midoriya. But please call me Deku. Mr. Deku, you may accompany us to Wayne Manor for the night. We can discuss your situation in the morning. As they left the police station, Deku found himself walking beside Bruce toward an expensive-looking car. The boy's hand found his again, gripping it tightly. Deku? Bruce said quietly. Yes? Will you teach me? Teach you what? Bruce looked up at him, and in those blue eyes, Deku saw something that made his heart ache. A familiar determination, a familiar pain, a familiar desire to ensure that what happened to him never happened to anyone else. How to be a hero. How to stop bad people. How to make sure no other kid loses their parents in an alley. Deku squeezed the boy's hand gently. He thought of his own journey, of All Might, of everything that had led him to this moment. He was trapped in a strange world with no idea how to get home, but looking at this orphaned boy who reminded him so much of himself, he knew what his answer would be. Yes, he said softly. I'll teach you everything I know. As the car pulled away from the police station, Deku looked out at Gotham City, dark, crime-ridden, without a single quirk or hero to protect it. He thought of the portal that had brought him here, of Eri and his friends who must be worried sick, of the life he'd been torn away from. But he also thought of Bruce Wayne, 8 years old, and already carrying a weight no child should bear. This city had no heroes, but it clearly needed them, and until he could find a way home, Deku would be what he'd always been, a hero who couldn't help but save everyone he could. The car drove through the dark streets of Gotham, carrying a boy who would one day become a legend, and a hero from another world who would help shape him. Neither of them knew it yet, but this was the beginning of something extraordinary. The birth of a new kind of hero for a world that desperately needed one. Wayne Manor loomed in the distance, a massive Gothic structure that looked like something from a fairy tale. As they approached, Deku felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He'd failed to save Thomas and Martha Wayne, but perhaps he could save their son from the darkness that threatened to consume him. Alfred? Deku said as they pulled up to the manor. Yes, Mr. Deku? I know this is unusual, but I want to help. Not just Bruce, but this city. Where I come from, I'm a hero. It's not just what I do, it's who I am. If I'm stuck here, I need to continue that work. Alfred met his eyes in the rearview mirror. Gotham City has a way of destroying those who try to save it, Mr. Deku. Many have tried to be its hero. None have succeeded. Then maybe it's time for a different approach, Deku said, thinking of All Might's smile, of the way one person could change everything just by saying I am here. Maybe Gotham doesn't need a hero who works from the shadows. Maybe it needs a symbol of hope. Bruce looked up at him, something flickering in his eyes, interest, maybe even hope of his own. Perhaps, Alfred said thoughtfully as the car came to a stop. Perhaps you're right. Time will tell, Mr. Deku. Time will tell. As they entered Wayne Manor, Deku couldn't shake the feeling that everything had changed, not just for him, but for this world. He'd failed to save Bruce's parents, but maybe, just maybe, he could save Bruce himself. And through Bruce, perhaps he could save Gotham. The manor was even more impressive inside. All dark wood and oil paintings, luxury that spoke of old money and older traditions. Bruce led him through the halls with the automatic ease of someone who'd grown up here, though his shoulders were slumped with exhaustion and grief. This will be your room, Alfred said, opening a door to reveal a spacious guest bedroom. I'll have some clothes brought up. I imagine you'll want to change out of that costume. Deku looked down at his hero's suit, now stained with blood and alley grime. Thank you? For everything, Alfred nodded. Master Bruce, you should try to rest as well. Can I stay with Deku? Bruce asked quickly. Just for tonight. I don't want to be alone. Alfred and Deku exchanged glances. Alfred nodded slightly. Of course, Deku said. There's a couch in here. You can stay as long as you need. As Alfred left to make arrangements, Bruce sat on the couch, looking small and lost in the large room. Deku sat beside him, not speaking, just being present. My parents loved this city, Bruce said suddenly. Dad was always working on ways to make it better. Mom ran charities, helped at the orphanage. They believed Gotham could be saved. They sound like heroes to me, Deku said softly. They were. Bruce's voice cracked. And now they're gone, and Gotham is still broken. Deku thought carefully about his next words. Bruce, can I tell you something? About being a hero, Bruce nodded. Where I come from, I wasn't born with powers. I was what we call quirkless, normal, like everyone in this world seems to be. But I wanted to be a hero more than anything, and someone very important told me something that changed my life. What did they say? Deku smiled sadly, remembering All Might on that rooftop so many years ago. They said that anyone can be a hero, that the power isn't what makes you heroic, it's the desire to help others, even when you're scared, even when it seems impossible. Bruce was quiet for a moment. But you have powers now. I do. They were given to me by someone who believed I had the heart of a hero. But Bruce, I was ready to be a hero even without them. And in this world, where no one has powers, maybe that's the kind of hero Gotham needs. Someone without powers? Someone with the will to stand up to the darkness, no matter what. Someone who refuses to let fear win. Deku looked at Bruce seriously. Your parents stood up to make Gotham better in their way. Maybe you'll find your own way. Bruce yawned despite himself, the exhaustion of the night catching up with him. Will you really teach me? How to fight, how to be strong, if that's what you want. But Bruce, being a hero isn't just about fighting. It's about protecting people, inspiring them, showing them that things can be better, like you tried to do tonight. The words were like a punch to the gut, but Deku nodded. Yes. And I'll keep trying. Every day, as long as I'm here. Bruce's eyes were drooping now. I'm glad you're here, Deku. I know you couldn't save them, but I'm glad you're here. As the boy drifted off to sleep on the couch, Deku stood and walked to the window, looking out at Gotham's skyline. Somewhere out there, in another dimension, his friends were probably frantically trying to find him. Eri was probably blaming herself. All Might was probably mobilizing every resource to bring him home. But for now, he was here, in a world without heroes, with a young boy who had just lost everything. I couldn't save your parents, Bruce, he whispered to the sleeping child. But I swear, I'll do everything in my power to save you. To help you become the hero this city needs. Outside, Gotham's darkness stretched endlessly, crime and corruption festering in every shadow. But for the first time since Thomas and Martha Wayne died, there was a small light in that darkness. A hero from another world and a boy who would one day become a legend. The green sparks of One for All flickered gently around Deku's hands as he made his silent vow. This world might not have heroes yet, but that was about to change. After all, a true hero always finds a way to help, no matter which world they're in. The morning sun struggled to penetrate the heavy curtains of Wayne Manor, casting long shadows across the guest room where Izuku Midoriya had spent his first night in this strange new world. He hadn't slept, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Thomas Wayne's blood spreading across white fabric, heard Martha Wayne's screams, felt the weight of Bruce's small hand in his. The boy was still asleep on the couch, curled into a ball as if trying to make himself as small as possible. Even in sleep, his face was troubled, eyebrows furrowed and lips occasionally trembling with suppressed sobs. Deku had kept watch all night, using the time to fill one of the notebooks Alfred had thoughtfully provided, documenting everything he'd observed about this world. Day 1 in Gotham City, he'd written at the top of the first page. Dimensional displacement via unstable quark interaction. Current location: Wayne Manor, Gotham City, New Jersey, USA. Notable observations: complete absence of quark signatures in all individuals encountered. Technology level appears comparable to my world but developed along different paths without quark enhancement. Crime rate appears significantly higher than any Japanese city, possibly due to lack of pro-heroes. A soft knock interrupted his writing. The door opened quietly, and Alfred entered carrying a tray with tea and breakfast. "Good morning, Mr. Deku," Alfred said in a hushed tone, glancing at Bruce's sleeping form. "I trust you resided comfortably?" "I didn't sleep," Deku admitted, setting down his pen. "I was worried Bruce might have nightmares." "And did he?" "3 times. But he settled when I talked to him." Alfred set the tray down, his movements precise and elegant despite his age. "May I ask what you said to him?" Deku looked at the notebook in his hands. "I told him about heroes from my world. About how they save people with a smile, how they stand as symbols of peace and hope." It seemed to calm him. "Heroes." Alfred tested the word as if it were foreign. "We have legends, of course. Stories of extraordinary individuals. But nothing quite like what you describe." He paused, studying Deku with sharp eyes. "You wrote all night?" "It's a habit. Where I come from, I analyze everything: quirks, fighting styles, strategies. I figured understanding this world might help me find a way home. Or at least help me protect people while I'm here." Alfred picked up one of the filled notebooks, raising an eyebrow at the detailed sketches of Gotham's architecture and the crime scene from the night before. "This is remarkably thorough." "Knowledge is power," Deku said, then winced. "Sorry, that probably sounds pretentious." "On the contrary, it sounds like something Master Thomas would have said." Alfred's expression grew distant. He believed in the power of preparation and understanding. It's one of the reasons Wayne Enterprises became so successful. Bruce stirred on the couch, eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion crossed his features, then the memory of the previous night crashed back. Deku saw the exact moment it happened. The boy's eyes went from sleepy to haunted in an instant. "Good morning, Bruce," Deku said gently. Bruce sat up slowly, his formal clothes from the night before wrinkled beyond salvation. "It wasn't a nightmare." "No," Deku confirmed. "But you're not alone." Alfred cleared his throat. "Master Bruce, I've taken the liberty of canceling your appointments for the week. However, there are matters that require attention." "The funeral arrangements." "Not yet," Bruce interrupted, his young voice firm. "Please, Alfred." "Not yet." Alfred nodded, though concern was evident in his features. "As you wish. However, we do need to discuss Mr. Deku's situation." Bruce immediately became protective. "He's staying, Master Bruce." "He's staying, Alfred." Bruce's jaw set in that stubborn way Deku was beginning to recognize. "He has nowhere else to go, and he's saved." The boy's voice cracked. "He tried to save them." "I'm not suggesting we cast him out," Alfred said patiently. "But we need to consider the practicalities. Mr. Deku has no identification in this world, no legal status. His very existence raises questions we're not prepared to answer." Deku stood, moving to the window where Gotham's skyline stretched out in the morning haze. The city looked different in daylight, less menacing but somehow more broken, like seeing a wound clearly for the first time. I can't hide forever, he said. Where I come from, heroes work in the open. We're symbols that people can rely on. If I'm going to help this city, I need to understand it first. Help the city? Alfred's tone was skeptical. Mr. Deku, Gotham has destroyed better men than you. The corruption runs so deep that even the Wayne family's considerable resources have barely made a dent. Deku turned, and Alfred saw something in his green eyes that made him pause, a determination that seemed almost supernatural in its intensity. Then maybe it's time for a different approach. You said you have no heroes here, no one with powers. But from what I saw last night, this city desperately needs them. You want to be Gotham's hero? Bruce asked, hope creeping into his voice. I want to understand why Gotham is the way it is, Deku corrected. Every city has crime, but this feels different. Deeper, Alfred sighed, recognizing a losing battle. If you're serious about this, you'll need to understand Gotham's history, its power structures. He moved to a bookshelf, pulling out several volumes. These might help. Thomas compiled extensive research on the city's crime families and corruption networks. Deku accepted the books gratefully, already flipping through pages filled with notes and what must have been Thomas Wayne's handwriting. Crime families? The Falcones, the Maronis, the Bertinellis, Alfred listed. They've run Gotham's underworld for generations. The police are either bought or intimidated. The few honest cops, like Lieutenant Gordon, are islands in a sea of corruption. Gordon, he was at the scene last night, Deku recalled. One of the few good ones, Alfred confirmed. But even he can only do so much. Bruce had moved to look over Deku's shoulder at the books. Dad was trying to fight them. Not directly, but through economics. He was buying up slums to rebuild them, funding rehabilitation programs. And they killed him for it? Deku asked. Alfred shook his head. The mugging was random, we believe. The Waynes were simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Deku noticed the slight hesitation in Alfred's voice, filing it away for later consideration. The next several days fell into a strange routine. During the mornings, Deku studied everything Alfred could provide about Gotham, its history, its economics, its criminal ecosystem. The city was like a patient with a disease that had metastasized into every organ. The crime families controlled the docks, the police, even parts of the government. Legitimate businesses paid protection money or faced destruction. The poor were trapped in cycles of poverty and crime that seemed inescapable. It's systematic, Deku muttered one afternoon, surrounded by charts and diagrams he'd created. The corruption isn't just crime, it's become part of how the city functions. Bruce, who had taken to sitting with him during these study sessions, looked up from his own notebook. He'd started copying Deku's analytical style, making his own observations about the city. Dad used to say Gotham was sick, Bruce offered. That it needed medicine, not surgery. Sometimes, Deku said carefully, a disease is so advanced that you need both. Alfred, who had been adjusting his opinion of their strange guest with each passing day, set down tea for both of them. And what medicine would you prescribe, Mr. Deku? Hope, Deku said simply. In my world, heroes don't just stop crime, they inspire people to be better. They show that things can change. Pretty words, Alfred said, though not unkindly. But Gotham has a way of crushing hope. Then maybe it needs someone who can't be crushed. That night, Deku made his first foray into Gotham proper. He modified his costume using materials Alfred had quietly procured, darker colors to blend with Gotham's aesthetic, though he kept the green accents that were part of his identity. You're going out, Bruce said. It wasn't a question. The boy had appeared in Deku's doorway, already in his pajamas. Just to observe, Deku said. I need to understand how the city works at night. Be careful. Bruce's voice was small. I don't want to lose anyone else. Deku knelt down to Bruce's level. I promise I'll come back. Heroes always keep their promises. He left through a window, using float to drift silently from the manor grounds toward the city proper. The sensation of using his quirk in this quirkless world was strange. One for all seemed to pulse more strongly here, as if it was trying to fill the void left by the absence of other quirks. Gotham at night was a different beast entirely. Where his patrols in Japan had been mostly prevention and public service, Here he witnessed crime after crime. In the span of an hour, he counted 3 muggings, 2 drug deals, and what looked like a protection money collection. He stayed in the shadows at first, observing, learning. The criminals here were different from the villains in his world. They lacked quirks, but they had a casual brutality that was somehow more disturbing. They hurt people not for grand schemes or ideological reasons, but simply because they could. The first time he intervened, it was instinctive. A woman was being cornered by 3 men in an alley, and Deku's body moved before his mind could catch up. He dropped from above, using Black Whip to immediately restrain all 3 attackers before they could even cry out. The woman stared at him, eyes wide with terror that didn't diminish even after she realized she was safe. "It's okay," Deku said, trying to use his most reassuring hero voice. "You're safe now." She ran without a word. The pattern repeated throughout the night. He stopped crimes, saved people, but instead of gratitude, he was met with fear and suspicion. These people had never seen a hero before. To them, he was just another unknown threat in a city full of them. By the time he returned to Wayne Manor as dawn broke, he was exhausted and discouraged. He found Alfred waiting in the study, newspaper in hand. "Eventful evening?" Alfred asked, showing him the early edition of the Gotham Gazette. The headline read, "Green Lightning, New Player in Gotham's Underworld?" Deku read the article with growing dismay. They'd completely misinterpreted his actions, assuming he was a new gang enforcer marking territory. "They think I'm a criminal," he said, slumping into a chair. "Gotham doesn't understand heroes, Mr. Deku," Alfred said, not unkindly. "In this city, power is synonymous with corruption. Anyone who displays it is automatically suspect. Then I need to change that perception." "How?" Deku was quiet for a moment, thinking. In his world, heroes had agencies, public relations, official channels. Here, he had none of that. "But maybe. I need to be visible," he said slowly. "Not just at night, not just stopping crimes. People need to see me helping in daylight, in ways they can understand." Over the next week, Deku adapted his approach. During the days, he appeared at accident scenes, using his quirks to rescue people from burning buildings or car crashes. He made sure to smile, to talk to people, to be seen helping without asking for anything in return. Bruce watched these exploits on the news, taking notes in his journal. "You're not hiding," Bruce observed one evening. "Every other person who's tried to fight crime in Gotham works from the shadows." "Shadows breed fear," Deku explained. "And Gotham has enough fear already." The media attention intensified. The Gazette ran a series of articles, trying to determine who or what the Green Lightning was. Theories ranged from government experiment to alien visitor. But slowly, the tone began to shift. A reporter named Vicky Vale wrote a piece titled "Guardian Angel or Menace?" That included interviews with people Deku had saved. "He smiled at me," one rescued child was quoted as saying. "He told me everything would be okay," and it was. But with visibility came danger. The crime families were taking notice. "The Falcon family isn't happy," Alfred informed them one morning, setting down intelligence he'd gathered through his surprisingly extensive network of contacts. "They see you as a threat to their operations." "Good," Deku said simply. "They'll try to kill you." "They can try." Bruce looked between them, absorbing every word. "What about the police? Surely some of them support what you're doing?" "Lieutenant Gordon has expressed interest," Alfred said carefully. "He hasn't condemned the Green Lightning publicly, which in Gotham is practically an endorsement." That night, Deku's patrol was interrupted by a woman's voice calling out to him. "Hey! Green Lightning!" He turned to find a young woman with red hair and a press badge standing fearlessly in an alley that most Gothamites would avoid. "Vicky Vale," she introduced herself. "Gotham Gazette. I've been trying to get an interview with you." Deku hesitated. In his world, heroes regularly gave interviews, but here. "What do you want to know?" he asked, staying in the shadows. "Everything," she said immediately. "Who are you? Where did you come from? What are those powers? Why Gotham?" "I'm someone who helps people," Deku said carefully. "The powers are complicated. As for why Gotham, this city needs help. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters." Vicky stepped closer, and Deku could see the determination in her eyes. "People are scared of you. Half the city thinks you're going to be worse than the crime families. And the other half? The other half is starting to hope, she admitted. There are rumors in the Narrows, people saying the green lightning protected them, that you're different from the others who claim to want to help. I am different, Deku said, finally stepping into the light where she could see him clearly. Where I come from, heroes are symbols of peace. They save people with a smile. They show that there's always hope, even in the darkest times. Vicky's eyes widened as she took in his appearance. The green costume, the gentle smile, the complete lack of menace despite his obvious power. You're not from around here, are you? She said. And I don't just mean Gotham. No, Deku admitted. But I'm here now, and I'm going to help this city. The crime families will come for you. The corrupt cops, the politicians they own, they'll all try to stop you. Then I'll stop them first. Not with fear or violence, but by showing people there's another way. Vicky studied him for a long moment. You really believe that, don't you? That you can save Gotham with hope and smiles? I have to believe it, Deku said. Because the alternative, letting fear and darkness win, isn't acceptable. She published the interview the next day, word for word. The headline read, "The Green Lightning Speaks. I'm here to bring hope." The response was immediate and divided. Some called him naive, others dangerous. But in the poorest parts of Gotham, something began to change. Children drew pictures of the green lightning on walls. Adults whispered that maybe, just maybe, someone was finally standing up for them. At Wayne Manor, Bruce read the article multiple times, analyzing every word. You revealed yourself, he said to Deku. Now everyone knows you're real, that you're here to stay. That was the point, Deku replied. Heroes can't inspire from the shadows. Is that what you're teaching me? To be visible? Deku looked at the boy who would one day become Batman, and chose his words carefully. I'm teaching you that there are many ways to be a hero, Bruce. Some inspire through visibility, others through mystery. The important thing is to find the method that works for you and your city. Bruce nodded thoughtfully, adding more notes to his journal. Alfred, watching from the doorway, saw the boy's obsession growing and wasn't sure whether to be concerned or grateful. Bruce had always been intense, but now that intensity had a focus beyond grief. That night, Deku encountered his first real test. He was patrolling the East End when danger sense flared, not the muted sensation he'd grown used to in this world, but a full alarm. He spun just in time to see multiple figures emerging from the shadows, all armed with military-grade weapons. Carmine Falcone sends his regards, one of them said before opening fire. Deku moved, one for all flowing through him at 40%. He dodged the initial barrage, using air force to create pressure waves that knocked several attackers off their feet. Black whips shot out, disarming others before they could adjust their aim. But these weren't common thugs. They were professionals, and they'd come prepared. One pulled out what looked like a rocket launcher. Seriously? Deku muttered, using float to launch himself skyward just as the rocket destroyed the spot where he'd been standing. The explosion drew attention. Within minutes, police sirens were approaching, and Deku could see news vans in the distance. This was no longer a shadow war. It was a public declaration. He landed in the middle of the remaining attackers, smoke screen billowing out to obscure their vision. In the confusion, he systematically took them down with precise strikes, ensuring each was unconscious but alive. When the smoke cleared, he stood among the defeated assassins, completely unharmed. The first police car to arrive was driven by Lieutenant Gordon himself. Gordon stepped out, gun drawn but not quite pointed at Deku. The green lightning, I presume? Lieutenant Gordon, Deku nodded respectfully. These men attacked me? They claim to work for Carmine Falcone. Gordon's expression tightened. You have proof? They announced it before attacking. I'm sure the news cameras caught some of it. Indeed, Vicky Vale was already on scene, her cameraman filming everything. Gordon looked between the unconscious criminals and Deku, clearly wrestling with protocol. Your vigilantism is illegal, he said finally. So is attempted murder, Deku replied. And corruption. And the dozens of other crimes that happen every night, while the police are too bought or too scared to act. Gordon's jaw clenched. Not all of us are corrupt. I know, Deku said, his tone softening. That's why I'm talking to you instead of disappearing. Lieutenant, this city needs help. I'm not trying to replace the police. I'm trying to show that things can be better. By beating up criminals? By protecting people? By showing them they don't have to live in fear? Deku gestured to the growing crowd of onlookers. Look at them, Lieutenant. When was the last time they saw someone stand up to the crime families and win? Gordon was quiet for a long moment. Then, he lowered his gun. I can't officially sanction what you're doing. But I won't stop you either. Just try not to kill anyone. Heroes don't kill, Deku said firmly. They save everyone, even the villains, when possible. Gordon looked at him like he was insane. This is Gotham, not a fairy tale. Maybe it's time Gotham had a fairy tale ending. As Gordon's officers began arresting the unconscious attackers, Deku used float to rise into the air, making sure the cameras caught him. He gave his best All Might-inspired smile and a wave before disappearing into the night. The footage played on every news channel for the next 24 hours. Green Lightning defeats Falcone Death Squad became the headline. For the first time in decades, someone had publicly challenged the crime families and won. At Wayne Manor, Bruce watched the footage obsessively, breaking down every move Deku had made. You could have been killed, he said when Deku returned. But I wasn't, Deku replied. And now the city knows the crime families aren't invincible. They'll escalate, Alfred warned. Falcone won't let this stand. I'm counting on it, Deku said, which earned him alarmed looks from both Alfred and Bruce. The crime families rule through fear. Every time they attack me and fail, that fear diminishes. Eventually, people will realize they don't have to be afraid anymore. And then? Alfred asked. Then Gotham can start healing. Bruce stood up, his young face set with determination. I want to help. Bruce, you're 8 years old. I'll be 9 next month, Bruce interrupted. And you said anyone can be a hero. Train me. Teach me. Let me help save my city. Deku looked at the boy, orphaned, traumatized, but burning with a determination that reminded him of himself at that age. He thought of All Might, of how one person's belief had changed his entire life. All right, he said finally. We'll start with observation and analysis. A hero's greatest weapon is their mind. Bruce's face lit up with the first genuine smile Deku had seen from him since that night in the alley. Over the following weeks, Deku's presence in Gotham became impossible to ignore. He appeared at crime scenes, disasters, and accidents. He stopped robberies in broad daylight, always ensuring his actions were visible and his intentions clear. The media dubbed him everything from the Emerald Guardian to Gotham's first hero, though Green Lightning remained the most popular moniker. The crime families tried everything: assassins, traps, even attempting to frame him for crimes. Each attempt failed, often spectacularly and publicly. Deku made sure never to use lethal force, always leaving criminals for the police, always smiling for the cameras even when exhausted or injured. Slowly, something unprecedented began to happen. Crime rates in the areas he patrolled dropped, not just because criminals feared him, but because citizens began to cooperate with police, emboldened by the Green Lightning's example. Gordon reported a spike in witness testimonies and anonymous tips. You're actually doing it, Vicky Vale said during one of their impromptu interviews. You're changing Gotham. Gotham is changing itself, Deku corrected. I'm just showing people it's possible. But the real change was happening at Wayne Manor. Bruce absorbed everything Deku taught him: combat theory, strategic thinking, the psychology of fear and hope. He filled journal after journal with observations, developing his own theories about crime fighting. You approach from above when possible, Bruce noted one evening, reviewing footage of Deku's patrols. Height provides tactical advantage and psychological impact. Very good, Deku praised. What else? You always ensure civilians are clear before engaging. You use non-lethal force even when lethal would be easier. And you smile, always smile, even when you're hurt or tired. Why do you think I smile? Bruce considered this. Because fear spreads. But so does hope. The smile shows people that someone believes things will be okay. Exactly. Alfred watched these lessons with mixed feelings. On one hand, Bruce was emerging from his grief, finding purpose in learning. On the other, he was being shaped into something Alfred wasn't sure Thomas and Martha would have wanted for their son. You're turning him into you, Alfred said to Deku one night after Bruce had gone to bed. No, Deku replied. I'm giving him the tools to become himself. Whatever that ends up being. And if he chooses a darker path? Gotham has a way of corrupting even the best intentions. Deku looked out at the city lights, thinking of the boy who would one day become the Dark Knight. Then I'll be here to remind him of the light. For as long as I can. 1 month after the Wayne murders, Deku had become a fixture in Gotham's landscape. The Green Lightning was no longer a rumor or urban legend. He was real, present, and actively changing the city's dynamics. Crime families were pulling back, corrupt cops were nervous, and for the first time in generations, the people of Gotham were beginning to hope. But in the shadows, forces were stirring. The old order of Gotham wouldn't die easily, and there were those who saw the Green Lightning not as a hero, but as a threat to be eliminated at any cost. At Wayne Manor, Bruce Wayne filled another journal with his observations, his young mind already working on ways to fight crime when he grew older. He watched Deku with intense focus, learning not just techniques but philosophy, absorbing lessons about justice and heroism that would shape him for years to come. "Do you think you'll ever get home?" Bruce asked one evening as they watched the sunset over Gotham. Deku was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. Part of me is still looking for a way back. But another part." He looked at Bruce. "Another part thinks maybe I was sent here for a reason. To help you, to help Gotham. I'm glad you're here," Bruce said quietly. "Even if it's because of the worst night of my life. I'm glad you're here." Deku put a hand on the boy's shoulder. "So am I, Bruce. So am I." As night fell over Gotham, the Green Lightning prepared for another patrol. But now he wasn't alone. He had allies in Alfred and Gordon, a purpose in protecting the city, and a student in Bruce Wayne who would one day carry on the mission in his own unique way. The quirkless city was learning what it meant to have a hero. And despite all the challenges ahead, Deku couldn't help but smile. After all, that's what heroes did. They smiled in the face of adversity, and declared that everything would be all right. Because in the end, whether in a world of quirks or a world without them, that's what it meant to be a hero. The rain hadn't stopped falling on Gotham for 3 days straight. It drummed against the windows of Wayne Manor with a persistence that seemed almost malevolent, as if the city itself was weeping. Izuku Midoriya stood in the manor's study, surrounded by newspapers, police reports, and his own extensive notes. 2 months had passed since his arrival in this quirkless world, and he'd made significant progress in understanding Gotham's criminal ecosystem. But tonight something felt different. "You're troubled," Alfred observed, entering with a tea service. The butler had developed an uncanny ability to read Deku's moods, perhaps from years of interpreting the subtle signals of the Wayne family. "There's going to be a major crime tonight," Deku said, tapping one of his notebooks. "All the patterns point to it. The Falcon family has been too quiet since their last failed attempt on my life. The weapons shipments Gordon's been tracking have disappeared. And there's been unusual activity around AC Chemicals." Bruce looked up from his own notebook, where he'd been documenting Deku's patrol patterns and crime-fighting techniques. The boy had thrown himself into this training with an intensity that sometimes worried Deku. It was as if studying heroism was the only thing keeping his grief at bay. "AC Chemicals processes industrial compounds," Bruce said, demonstrating the remarkable memory that would one day make him the world's greatest detective. "Dad's company had contracts with them. They handled dangerous materials, acids, experimental compounds, things that could be weaponized." Deku nodded, impressed as always by Bruce's knowledge. "That's what worries me. If someone's planning something there, it could be catastrophic," Alfred finished. "Perhaps you should alert Lieutenant Gordon." "I already did," Deku replied. "But he says without concrete evidence, he can't get authorization for a raid. Too many judges and commissioners are on Falcone's payroll." "So you're going alone," Bruce said. It wasn't a question. Deku turned to the boy, seeing the concern in those blue eyes that had seen too much for someone so young. "It's what heroes do, Bruce. When people are in danger we act. My parents acted too," Bruce said quietly. "They tried to help Gotham." The unspoken conclusion hung in the air, and look what happened to them. Deku knelt down to Bruce's level, placing a gentle hand on his shoulder. "Your parents were brave, Bruce. They fought Gotham's darkness in their own way. But they were taken by surprise, by random violence. I won't be. I have abilities they didn't, training they didn't. And most importantly," he smiled, that bright, reassuring smile he'd learned from All Might, "I have you and Alfred watching my back." Bruce managed a small smile in return. Be careful, Mr. Deku. Always am. As night fell, Deku made his way across Gotham's rain-slicked rooftops, using float to leap between buildings with an ease that still drew stares from the few Gothamites brave enough to be out in this weather. ACE Chemicals loomed ahead, a massive industrial complex on the east side, its smokestacks dark against the darker sky. Danger Sense had been acting strangely since he'd arrived in this world, muted, as if struggling to detect threats that didn't involve quirks. But as he approached the chemical plant, it flared to life with an intensity that made him stumble mid-leap. The place was a trap. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to get reinforcements, to do anything but enter alone. But then he heard it, voices, carried on the wind. Workers. There were still people inside. Hero Course 101, he muttered to himself, save everyone, no matter the risk. He circled the complex, noting the unusual security preparations. The normal guards were gone, replaced by men in clown masks carrying military-grade weapons. His eyes narrowed. Clown masks? That was new. The Gotham crime families usually preferred traditional intimidation tactics. Using Black Whip, he silently descended to a skylight, peering into the main processing floor. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dozens of workers were tied up in the center of the room, surrounded by armed criminals. Chemical vats bubbled ominously, their contents glowing an unsettling green under the industrial lights. And standing in the middle of it all was a man Deku had only seen in grainy surveillance photos, Jack Napier. Napier was Carmine Falcone's best enforcer, known for his ruthlessness and cunning. But intelligence suggested he'd been growing increasingly erratic, taking bigger risks, pushing boundaries even the crime families found uncomfortable. He wore an expensive purple suit that seemed out of place in the industrial setting, and his face bore a constant smirk that didn't reach his eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, Napier announced to his hostages, spreading his arms theatrically. Welcome to the grand finale of Jack Napier. Tonight we make history. Tonight, we kill the Green Lightning and show Gotham that their new hero is just another corpse waiting to happen. One of the workers, a middle-aged woman, spoke up despite her fear. He'll stop you. The Green Lightning doesn't lose. Napier's smirk widened into something more unsettling. Oh, I'm counting on him coming. You see, I've studied our Emerald friend. He has a compulsion. He has to save everyone. It's his weakness. He pulled out a remote control, waving it casually. This entire plant is rigged to blow. Enough explosives to take out 6 city blocks. The moment our hero arrives, I give him a choice: save you people, or stop me from releasing all these lovely chemicals into Gotham's water supply. You're insane, another hostage gasped. Insane? Napier laughed, but there was no humor in it. No. I'm practical. This city runs on fear and power. The Green Lightning threatens that order, so he has to die, and you all get to be part of the show. Deku had heard enough. He activated One for All at 20%, just enough to enhance his movements without the telltale green lightning that would announce his presence. Using smokescreen, he filled the ventilation system with dark fog, letting it seep into the main floor. What the? One of the criminals started to say before the smoke engulfed him. Deku dropped through the skylight, using float to control his descent and Black Whip to immediately grab 3 criminals, yanking them up and knocking them unconscious against the ceiling beams. In the confusion of the smoke, he moved like a ghost, systematically taking down the armed guards while using air force to create pressure bubbles around the hostages, protecting them from any stray gunfire. He's here! Napier shouted, laughing with genuine delight. The hero arrives! Everyone to positions! The smoke began to clear. Napier's men had activated industrial fans. Deku found himself standing between the hostages and Napier, who was backing toward a catwalk over the largest chemical vat. Green Lightning! Napier called out cheerfully. So good of you to join us. I was starting to worry you wouldn't show. Let them go, Napier, Deku said, his voice calm but firm. Your issue is with me, not these innocent people. Innocent? Napier tilted his head. In Gotham? Oh, that's rich. There are no innocent people in Gotham, hero. We're all guilty of something. These workers process chemicals that poison the environment. That woman there cheats on her husband. That man embezzles from the pension fund. His grin grew wider. We're all sinners here. The only difference is I'm honest about it. Everyone makes mistakes, Deku said, taking a step forward. But that doesn't mean they deserve to die. Everyone deserves a chance at redemption. Redemption, Napier mused, pulling out a gun. What a quaint concept. Tell me, hero, where was redemption for the Wayne family? Oh yes, I know about that night. You couldn't save them, could you? The great green lightning, frozen while Thomas Wayne bled out in an alley. The words hit Deku like a physical blow, but he didn't let it show. You're right. I failed them. But their son lives, and every life I save honors their memory. How poetic, Napier said, then suddenly fired at the hostages. Deku moved instantly, one for all surging to 40%. He intercepted the bullets with his reinforced gauntlets, the impacts sending small shockwaves through the air. But it had been a distraction. Napier was already at the chemical vat controls, his hand on a lever. Here's your choice, hero. Napier shouted. This lever releases everything into the water supply. The remote in my other hand detonates the explosives. You can't stop both. So what's it going to be? Save the hostages from the explosion, or stop me from poisoning the city? Deku's mind raced, analyzing angles, distances, possibilities. Danger sense was screaming at him from multiple directions. The explosives were real. He could see the charges placed throughout the structure. The chemical release would be catastrophic. But there had to be a way. There was always a way. You know what your problem is, Napier? Deku said, green lightning beginning to crackle around him. You think like a villain. You see only two choices because you can't imagine someone being fast enough, strong enough, or determined enough to save everyone. He pushed one for all to 60%, higher than he'd used since arriving in this world. His body protested, muscles straining, but he ignored the pain. Let me show you what a hero can do. Deku burst into motion, using FA gene to build kinetic energy. He launched himself at the hostages first, black whip exploding from his arms in multiple tendrils. Each one grabbed a hostage, and with a combination of float and air force, he literally threw them through the windows to safety, counting on the flood of emergency responders outside to catch them. Napier pulled the chemical release lever and hit the detonators simultaneously. Impossible! He screamed, but Deku was already moving. He used the last of his built-up FA gene energy to rocket toward the chemical controls, slamming the emergency shutdown with enough force to crack the console. The chemical flow stopped, but the explosives were already counting down, 10 seconds. Everyone out! Deku roared to any remaining criminals, even as he spun toward Napier. The man was laughing hysterically now, standing on the narrow catwalk with his arms spread wide. You can't save everyone, hero! You can't save me! Deku launched himself forward, black whip shooting out to grab Napier. I can try, but Napier did something unexpected. He shot the catwalk supports. The metal groaned and twisted, and suddenly both of them were falling toward the chemical vat below. The same vat that, despite being shut off, still contained a toxic mixture of chemicals that glowed an unsettling green. Time seemed to slow. Deku could save himself easily, float, black whip, even just grabbing the edge would work. But Napier was falling too, and despite everything, Deku couldn't let him die. He adjusted his trajectory, reaching out to grab the criminal. His fingers brushed Napier's suit jacket. The explosives detonated. The shockwave hit them mid-fall. Deku managed to wrap Napier in black whip, trying to protect him, but the force of the blast sent them both tumbling. Deku hit the edge of the vat hard, managing to grab on with one hand while holding Napier with black whip from the other. I've got you! Deku shouted over the sound of collapsing structure. Don't struggle. But Napier was laughing again, that unsettling laugh that seemed disconnected from reality. You're trying to save me? Me? The man who just tried to kill dozens of people? Everyone deserves to be saved, Deku gritted out, trying to pull them both up despite his muscles screaming in protest. Even the irredeemable? Napier pulled out a knife Deku hadn't seen, slashing at the black whip holding him. Don't. I don't want to be saved, hero. I want to be remembered. The black whip severed. Napier fell, still laughing, into the vat of chemicals below. No! Deku reached out desperately, shooting out more black whip, but it was too late. Napier hit the surface and sank beneath the glowing green chemicals. The building was coming down around him. Deku had to leave, had to get out before the entire structure collapsed. But he stayed for precious seconds longer, staring at the vat, waiting to see if Napier would surface. He didn't. Finally, with the ceiling beginning to cave in, Deku used float, and what remained of his strength to escape through a hole in the roof. He landed hard on a neighboring building, one for all finally cutting out as his body reached its limit. He could only watch as AC chemicals collapsed in on itself, the remaining chemicals creating toxic smoke that the rain thankfully kept from spreading. Emergency services swarmed the scene. The hostages were all alive, he could see them being treated by paramedics. The criminals who hadn't escaped were being arrested. By any measure, it was a successful rescue. So why did he feel like he'd failed? Lieutenant Gordon found him an hour later, still standing on that rooftop, staring at the wreckage. The hostages are all safe, Gordon reported. You saved 37 people tonight. 37, Deku repeated numbly. Not 38. Gordon followed his gaze to the collapsed chemical plant. Jack Napier? I tried to save him. I had him, but he chose to fall. Napier was a killer, green lightning. He had murder charges in 3 states. The world's better off. No, Deku interrupted, his voice sharp. No one is better off dead. Everyone can be redeemed. Everyone deserves a chance. I should have saved him. Gordon was quiet for a moment. You can't save everyone. Even heroes have limits. In my world, Deku said quietly, the greatest hero once told me that a true hero always finds a way to save everyone. Tonight I failed that ideal. Your world sounds nice, Gordon said. But this is Gotham. Sometimes people don't want to be saved. Deku didn't respond. He just stood there, rain mixing with what might have been tears, watching the smoke rise from AC chemicals. When he finally returned to Wayne Manor, dawn was breaking. Bruce was waiting in the study, having stayed up all night monitoring the news. You saved them, Bruce said immediately. All the hostages. Not everyone, Deku replied, slumping into a chair. His costume was torn, burned, and stained with chemicals. Jack Napier died. Bruce was quiet for a moment, processing this. The news says he was a killer. That he'd murdered dozens of people. That doesn't matter. A hero saves everyone, Bruce. Even the villains. Especially the villains, because they're the ones who need saving the most. Alfred entered with medical supplies, taking in Deku's battered appearance with practiced calm. Master Bruce, perhaps you should retire. It's been a long night. I want to stay, Bruce protested. Go, Deku said gently. We'll talk more tomorrow. After Bruce reluctantly left, Alfred began treating Deku's injuries. Chemical burns, bruised ribs, strained muscles from overusing One for All. You did everything you could, Alfred said quietly. It wasn't enough. It never is, Alfred replied, with the weight of someone who'd seen too much. Thomas and Martha tried to save Gotham through charity and reform. They couldn't save everyone either. The question isn't whether you'll fail, you will. The question is what you do after. Deku looked up at the older man. What do you mean? You can let the failure break you, define you. Or you can learn from it and continue forward. The 37 people you saved tonight don't care that you couldn't save Napier. They care that you saved them. Before Deku could respond, the phone rang. Alfred answered it, his expression growing increasingly grave. I understand. Yes, we'll be watching. He hung up and turned on the news. The reporter on screen looked shaken. We're receiving reports of an incident at Gotham General Hospital. A patient was admitted 3 hours ago, pulled from the ruins of AC chemicals. Witnesses say the patient was laughing. Uncontrollably laughing. We're going now too. The feed cut to shaky phone footage from inside the hospital. Deku's blood went cold. A figure was walking down the hospital corridor. His skin was bleached white, his hair turned a shocking green. He was wearing a patient gown, but his face bore a permanent grin, stretched impossibly wide. And he was laughing, a sound that wasn't quite human anymore, something between hysteria and pure madness. Oh God, Deku breathed. The figure on screen turned to the camera, and even through the poor quality footage, his eyes were visible, wild, unfocused, but somehow aware. Green lightning. The figure called out in a voice that was recognizably Napier's but distorted, higher-pitched. Look what you did! You tried to save me, and you created something so much better. Isn't it funny? The laugh that followed made everyone in the footage step back. It wasn't the laugh of someone amused. It was the laugh of someone whose mind had fundamentally broken and reformed into something alien. The figure, Napier, or what had been Napier, continued walking, still laughing. I died in that vat, you know. Jack Napier died. But something new was born. Something funnier. He stopped, looking directly at the camera. I need a new name for this new me. Something that captures the joke of it all. The hero who saves everyone couldn't save me from becoming this. He spread his arms wide, the hospital gown revealing skin that was chalk white wherever it was visible. I know. Call me Joker. Because the joke's on you, Green Lightning. You wanted to save me? Congratulations. You saved something much more interesting. The footage cut off as security arrived, but the sound of that laughter continued for several seconds before the news returned to the shaken reporter. Deku stared at the screen in horror. The chemical bath had done something impossible. It had transformed Napier at a fundamental level, like a quirk awakening but wrong, twisted. What have I done? He whispered. Alfred placed a steady hand on his shoulder. You did what you thought was right. You couldn't have known. I should have let him fall. I should have saved myself and let him fall. And then you wouldn't be the hero you are, Alfred said firmly. The man who tries to save everyone, even those who don't deserve it. That's not a weakness, Mr. Deku. Even if sometimes it has consequences. The news continued, reporting that the patient calling himself Joker had escaped the hospital, leaving only chaos and that terrible laughter in his wake. 3 guards were in critical condition, not from physical wounds, but from some kind of chemical that induced uncontrollable laughter. They couldn't stop laughing, even as their bodies began to shut down from exhaustion. Bruce appeared in the doorway, despite having been sent to bed. I heard laughing. Deku looked at the boy who would one day become Batman, wondering how to explain that his attempt to save a life had possibly created something worse than death. There's been an incident, Alfred said carefully. Jack Napier survived? Bruce asked, looking at the TV. No, Deku said quietly. Jack Napier died. Something else survived. They watched the news in silence as reports came in. The Joker, as he called himself, had stolen medical supplies and disappeared into Gotham's underworld. But not before leaving a message painted on the hospital wall in what looked like green paint but tested as an unknown chemical compound. Thanks for the smile, Green Lightning. Let's play again soon. Jay, he's fixated on you, Bruce observed with a clarity beyond his years. You tried to save him, and now he's obsessed. Deku nodded slowly. In trying to be a hero, in trying to save everyone, had he created Gotham's greatest villain? The thought was almost too much to bear. Over the next week, reports trickled in. The Joker was gathering followers, not through fear or money like traditional crime bosses, but through a twisted charisma. He promised chaos, randomness, a freedom from the oppressive order of both the crime families and the law. Those who joined him came back changed, wearing clown makeup and exhibiting a disturbing tendency to laugh at inappropriate times. Deku threw himself into patrol work, desperately searching for the Joker, but it was like chasing smoke. The man appeared randomly, a robbery here where he gave the money away, an attack there that seemed to have no purpose except to cause chaos. And always, he left messages for the Green Lightning. Why so serious? Painted on a police station wall. Save me again. Carved into a park bench where children played. Best enemies forever spelled out in stolen traffic lights. The crime families were furious. The Joker wasn't following any rules, wasn't respecting any boundaries. He was chaos incarnate, and worse, he was making them all look foolish. Carmine Falcone put a bounty on his head that would make anyone rich for life. The Joker responded by sending Falcone a cake with thanks for the laugh written in green frosting. It exploded when opened, covering Falcone in green dye that took weeks to wash off. He's escalating, Gordon told Deku during one of their unofficial meetings. But there's no pattern, no logic. We can't predict where he'll strike next. There is a pattern, Deku said, staring at his notebook where he mapped every Joker incident. He's trying to get my attention. Every crime is designed to force me to respond. So respond, Gordon said. Stop him. I will. But Gordon. I created him. That night at AC Chemicals, I tried to save him and created this. Gordon was quiet for a moment. You didn't force him to become what he is. That was his choice, was it? The chemicals changed him, twisted his mind. Is he even capable of choice anymore? That's a question for philosophers, Gordon said pragmatically. Right now, he's a threat that needs to be stopped. That night, the Joker made his most public appearance yet. He took over Gotham's largest television station during the evening news, his chalk-white face and green hair filling screens across the city. Good evening, Gotham, he announced cheerfully, that permanent grin stretching wider. I'm here with a special message for our city's bright green hope. Deku watched from the manor, Bruce and Alfred beside him, as the Joker leaned toward the camera. Green lightning, you beautiful, naive fool. You tried to save me, and look what happened. I'm free. Free from Jack Napier's petty ambitions, free from sanity's boring constraints, free to show this city what it really is, one big, cosmic joke. He pulled out what looked like a crude map of Gotham. So here's tonight's game. I've placed laughing gas bombs in 3 locations. One's at a hospital, one's at an orphanage, and one's at a retirement home. You have 1 hour to find and disarm them all. Oh, and if you're wondering if I'm bluffing, the camera panned to show the news crew, all wearing gas masks except for one man who was laughing uncontrollably, tears streaming down his face as he gasped for air between bouts of hideous laughter. Tick-tock, hero. Let's see if you can save everyone this time. Ha ha! The transmission cut off. Deku was moving before the screen went dark, his costume already on under his clothes. Alfred, call Gordon. Bruce, monitor emergency channels. I want to come, Bruce said. No. Deku's tone brooked no argument. This is too dangerous. You need help. What I need is you safe, Deku said, softening his tone. Please, Bruce. Help from here. He left through the window, pushing One for All to 40% as he raced across Gotham. 3 locations, 1 hour. The hospital and orphanage were obvious choices, innocent victims, maximum emotional impact. But the retirement home? That seemed random unless... He activated his earpiece, a modification Alfred had made to his costume. Bruce, which retirement home has the highest concentration of former city officials? Bruce's voice came through immediately, the boy having ignored Deku's order to stay out of it. Sunset Manor on the east side. 3 former mayors, 2 judges, and oh, what? Commissioner Loeb's mother is there. He's the one who declared you a vigilante. So there was a pattern, past, present, and future. The retirement home for those who built Gotham's corruption, the hospital for those suffering from it now, and the orphanage for those who would inherit it. I'm splitting up, Deku decided. Bruce, guide me to the nearest one. You can't be in 3 places at once. Watch me. What followed was the most intense hour of Deku's heroic career. He pushed One for All beyond safe limits, using combinations of his quirks he never attempted before. Black Whip to swing between buildings while using air force to propel himself faster. Float combined with FA Gene to essentially fly across the city. Smokescreen to evacuate buildings while he searched for the bombs. At the hospital, he found the device hidden in the ventilation system. It was complex, but his analytical mind found the pattern. Disarmed with 12 minutes to spare. At the orphanage, the bomb was in the basement, hidden among old toys. The children thought he was a superhero from their comic books, which made evacuation easier. Disabled with 4 minutes left, the retirement home was the challenge. The Joker himself was there, sitting in the recreation room, reading jokes to the terrified elderly residents. Why did the hero cross the road? Joker asked as Deku burst in. To try and save everyone. But the punchline is, he can't. Ha ha, where's the bomb? Deku demanded. Bomb? Oh, there's no bomb here. Joker stood, his purple suit, a mockery of what he used to wear, catching the light. I lied. Well, not about the other 2. Those were real. But this was just to get you here. Why? To thank you? Joker spread his arms wide. You killed Jack Napier and birthed something beautiful. Me. I'm your creation, Green Lightning. Your failed save that became something so much more interesting. You're sick. The chemicals affected your mind. We can help you. Help? Joker laughed, and it was worse than any sound Deku had heard. I don't want help. I want to play. You're so serious, so determined to save everyone. And I'm going to show you how funny that is by making you fail, over and over and over. He pulled out a gun, aiming it at one of the residents. Deku moved, one for all at 50%, crossing the distance instantly. He grabbed the gun, crushing it in his grip, but Joker just laughed harder. See? So predictable. Save everyone, stop the bad guy. But what if the bad guy doesn't want to be stopped? He pulled a knife, not attacking Deku but holding it to his own throat. Go ahead, hero. Save me from myself. Deku froze. If Joker hurt himself, was it Deku's fault for not stopping him? But if he tried to stop him and Joker hurt someone else in the chaos? That's the look. Joker cackled. That beautiful moment when the hero realizes that sometimes there's no right answer. Sometimes the joke's on you. Police sirens were approaching. Joker heard them and sighed dramatically. Well, this has been fun, but I have a city to paint green. Until next time, hero. And there will be a next time. And a time after that, and after that. Because you created me, and now we're linked forever. The hero who saves everyone and the villain who exists because he tried. Isn't it perfect? He threw a smoke bomb. Where had he gotten that? And in the confusion vanished. By the time the smoke cleared, only his laughter remained, echoing through the building. Deku stood there, surrounded by terrified elderly people, Gordon's officers rushing in, and felt the weight of what he'd created crushing down on him. When he returned to Wayne Manor, Bruce was waiting with a detailed map of the night's events. You saved everyone, Bruce said. No one died. This time, Deku said heavily. But he'll be back. And it's my fault. No, Bruce said firmly. You tried to do the right thing. The fact that it went wrong doesn't make trying wrong. Deku looked at the boy, so young but already so wise. When did you become the teacher? I learned from the best, Bruce replied with a small smile. Alfred entered with the morning paper. The headline read, Joker and Green Lightning, Gotham's new nightmare? They're connecting us, Deku said, reading the article. Saying we're two sides of the same coin. Perhaps you are, Alfred said thoughtfully. You represent order through hope. He represents chaos through fear. You both changed because of that night at AC Chemicals. I didn't change, didn't you? Alfred interrupted gently. The Deku who arrived here 2 months ago wouldn't have doubted himself. Wouldn't have questioned whether saving everyone was possible. Gotham is changing you, just as you're changing it. Deku wanted to argue, but couldn't. Alfred was right. Every failure, every close call, every life he couldn't save was wearing on him. And now, with the Joker, I created my own archenemy, he said quietly. In trying to be the perfect hero, I created the perfect villain. Perfect? Bruce asked. He's everything I stand against. Chaos to my order. Despair to my hope. Laughter that hurts instead of heals. And he's right, we are linked now. Every time he commits a crime, it's partly my responsibility because I failed to save Jack Napier properly. That's not how responsibility works, Bruce argued. Isn't it? Deku looked at the boy. If you have the power to stop something and don't, aren't you partly responsible? Bruce considered this seriously. Too seriously for a 9-year-old. Then everyone's responsible for everything. My parents were responsible for the poverty that created their killer because they didn't fix it fast enough. You're responsible for every crime you don't stop. Where does it end? It doesn't, Deku admitted. That's the burden of being a hero. You carry the weight of everyone you couldn't save. That's stupid, Bruce said bluntly, with the honesty only a child could manage. You're not God. You're just a person with powers trying to help. The Joker chose to become what he is. You didn't make that choice for him. Deku wanted to believe that. But as he looked out at Gotham, he could already see the city changing. The Joker's chaos was spreading. Criminals were becoming bolder, more random. The order he'd been trying to build was cracking. And somewhere out there, The Joker was planning his next joke, his next attempt to prove that saving everyone was impossible. "What will you do?" Alfred asked. "What I always do," Deku said, straightening up. "I'll save everyone I can. Stop every crime I can. And when the Joker appears again, I'll stop him too. And if he's right? If you can't save everyone?" Deku thought of All Might, of his mentor's unwavering smile even in the face of impossible odds. "Then I'll save everyone I can and keep trying to find a way to save the rest. Because that's what heroes do." Bruce nodded, making notes in his journal. "The Joker thinks chaos beats order. But he's wrong. Order just needs to be stronger, smarter, more prepared." "Careful, Bruce," Deku warned. "That kind of thinking can lead to dark places." "Only if you let it," Bruce replied. "You taught me that power is meant to protect. As long as we remember that, we won't become like him." The sun was rising over Gotham, painting the city in shades of gold that temporarily masked its darkness. But Deku knew the darkness was still there, deeper now with the Joker's presence. He'd come to this world by accident, tried to be its hero, and in doing so had created its greatest villain. The guilt of that would stay with him forever. But so would his determination to make it right. "The Joker wants to play games," he said quietly. "He wants to prove that hope is meaningless, that chaos always wins. But he's wrong. Every person I save, every life I protect, proves him wrong." "Even if you created him?" Bruce asked. "Especially because I created him," Deku replied. "He's my responsibility now. My burden to bear. And I'll bear it, no matter how heavy it gets." Alfred looked between them, the hero from another world and the boy who would one day become a legend, and saw the future of Gotham taking shape. It wouldn't be easy. The Joker would return, again and again, a laughing reminder of the night heroism went wrong. But perhaps that was necessary. Perhaps every hero needed their opposite, their challenge, their proof that what they did mattered. The Joker's first laugh had echoed through Gotham, promising chaos and despair. But Deku's determination echoed louder, promising that no matter how dark the joke, hope would have the last laugh.